Well, good day, and thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know we all have, feels like we are juggling hundreds, if not thousands of balls. So we never take for granted when you choose to spend your valuable time here. And I try and make sure that we give you the best possible value when you choose to do that. And today I have been so looking forward to this episode, and I'm sure you will as well. We're going to be meeting today with Lydia Samaniego and her sons. She has four sons. We get to meet three out of four of them here today. They are stationed all around the world, and we're going to be talking about negotiating, if you will, in raising sons to have them become the best possible men that they can be. And Lydia can certainly speak to that. Some of you may remember we interviewed Lydia a while back now. She is the author of To Hell With You. Lydia is a first generation Mexican American and believes that anything can be overcome. And she shared a lot of her secrets with us in our last episode. Given her background, she's been a teacher, a yoga enthusiast, an energy worker. She does sound bath practitioner. She's a life mentor. She's got a BA from USC, an MA from Universidad de Salamanca in Spain. A fabulous episode. And when we got off air, we started chatting about the fact that she, had, as a single parent, had raised these four boys. And I was like, my gosh, that must have been a challenge. And she spoke with such pride about all of her four boys and what fabulous men they have grown to become. And this idea was born to get them all together and to be able to explore this concept. So joining us today, we've got Joseph, who has a PhD in plasma physics. Even just, I get shivers even just saying it. It's so intimidating to me. And he is working on nuclear fusion based in the Bay Area. We also have Joshua joining us today, and he is a self-taught software engineer. He is based in Iceland. So you can see they have all set up these very accomplished careers around the globe. Wesley, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to meet today, but he is a brewmaster based out of Argentina. And we have Tomas joining us today. He's an actor, singer, guitarist, and he is based in New York City. So without further ado, why don't we dig in? And it can be just sort of a bit of a free for all. So when I ask a question, feel free. We'll take turns giving feedback, and whoever has feedback on a question can jump in. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. But Lydia, why don't we start with you talking a bit about what was or is your philosophy being in a position where you were raising four boys in today's world?
Well, first, I want to say that it was my greatest honor
Mm.
and joy to be the mother of these four young men. And I think the key thing was to being honest. And because as parents, as everybody knows who's a parent, we make lots of mistakes and we don't know a lot of things. And to be honest when we can be or we recognize it,
Yeah.
because our sons or my sons already knew when I was messed up, or
Yeah.
I did that weren't right, And so when I admitted it, I think it opened the door for them to have a little respect for me. So
Yeah.
I think honesty is key in being a parent, you
Yeah.
know.
I love that. And it's funny when you say that about being honest about it, because most don't, right? We keep trying blustering through, trying to pretend that we know everything, want our kids to think we know everything. And I remember myself as a kid, that first time when you suddenly had that really sharp awareness that your parents weren't perfect, right? And it's a game changer when you hit that point, especially if there's no intelligent conversation about it. So, boy, what are your thoughts? How would you describe? And again, whoever wants to jump in first, were you aware of, or are you now looking back, aware of sort of what you would say would be philosophies that you saw your mom bringing to the table in raising you guys?
Hmm. Well,
I
I definitely
would.
agree. Go ahead,
Oh, you're
Josh.
good. I knew that was gonna happen. No, I would agree with my mom. Like my personal experience was, or with my mom's saying that honesty was very important for her. I would concur. That has been my experience being raised by her. That was always kind of at the forefront of things, and I think that was definitely important because it was allowed to have just open conversations about what's really happening, and I think it was a really great way to form trust. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And
Yeah, and
you were going to say something as well, I think there, Joseph.
yeah, in the context, my understanding, the context of your podcast about leadership and negotiation. I mean, when you're in the role of a parent, you are in the role of a leader.
Hmm.
And that ability to earn the trust of your children or anyone else who's following you is important. And doesn't people can spell bullshit really quick.
Yeah, that's true.
That's it's hard to be a parent if you don't have the respect of the people, or it's hard to lead if you don't have the respect of the people who are supposed to follow you.
Yeah,
Parent and child relationship is no different.
yeah,
So the ability to be honest with not just mistakes but also the reasons of why something's being done, and be able to explain and not come in from a position of forced authority
yeah.
is important.
Yeah, a lot packed in there in those answers, I must say. And it's funny because I've done a lot of podcast episodes as well about parenting generally from parenting experts and that. And I've never heard anybody describe that, but you're absolutely right. It is a leadership role. And yet we often don't approach it from those solid leadership principles that make for the best sort of organizations, if you will, or family structures. That is so true. And I'm really glad you guys are all focused on that honesty piece, because today we seem to be seeing, whether in the political sphere, where, not to get into politics, but on the political sphere, in the corporate world, we seem to be seeing a lot of profits over people, a lot of integrity issues and questions. So, and Tomas, what about you? And again, don't feel free, but did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on what you saw as your mom's philosophy and bringing you guys up?
Yeah, I think I'll take a little piece from what each of them said and kind of expand from what I think. What they were saying about not knowing all the answers is kind of being in that honesty point where admitting that or working with you in that space is kind of, I feel like, giving an answer, and more so than pretending.
Yeah.
And it becomes more of a relationship about, okay, let's find the answer, not my answer is the correct way only. It's like,
Mm,
let's do it together. And that is like being taken on the journey with your parent as opposed to being told what the journey is.
that's
Being
beautiful.
drugged along with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny as each of you are speaking, it reminds me how translatable it is. Like you're talking about that sort of parenting experience, and my gosh, though, doesn't that translate to whether it's politics or the corporate world? And Tomas, what you were just describing, it's that collaborative approach, that consensus building kind of approach that I think doesn't get enough attention. Historically, a lot of people saw that as sort of a weaker, softer approach. And I'm a big believer that's where the strength is, rather than taking a power over approach people, whether in parenting, which a lot of parents do, or, as you said, Joseph, into the corporate world as well, that kind of leadership style where we're exerting power over rather than power with, where we're letting everybody come to a consensus together. Now, do you mind if I ask? I assume that, for the boys, this is directing that your mom sort of had to be both dad and mom to a certain extent for some of the time. How was that experience for you? What was that your experience? And if so, how was it?
Short answer is yes. Kind of the common trope of being a single parent, right? You have
Yeah.
to be able to embody both, for lack of a better phrase, energies, but also both responsibilities, right? There are still gender roles in our society, right? And there are weights that are usually taken
Yeah.
on by either parent. And so if you're by yourself, then you kind of have to do both.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say for me, I actually never really saw my mom as a father figure, to be honest. For me, she was always just my mom.
Yeah.
And so like there were, I don't know if we're maybe later gonna get into like the whole masculine, feminine energy dynamics or whatever like that, that
Yeah.
would definitely what I'm about to say will probably definitely lend itself more to that conversation. But to be honest, I don't know. Whenever I especially growing up with my childhood with my mom, like I never really viewed her as a father figure. It was always just that's my mom. And it was always much more like she was her own thing. But yeah, I mean, later if we want to talk about the masculine feminine dynamics, we can, but that was just
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And let's pause that for a moment, because I think once we go there, we're going to be spinning off in a million
Yeah.
directions, and I can't wait to get to that. Although, having said that, and Dory, Tomas, I'll come to you in a second, but just while we're talking about it, did any of you ever feel like you were missing or needed a male role model, so to speak, in your life aside from your mom?
So I guess there's a nuance to that. I mean, we grew up close to our family. So my mother had, I know we have we had a lot of uncles, grandparents. So we had other male role models, for lack of a better
Yeah.
phrase, that we would be able to learn from. But but yeah, I guess there still was some aspect of it was. Well, I'll say this: it was interesting to hear opinions of being a man from the point of view of a woman. Does that make sense? So a
Yes.
lot of times, if it's a more traditional familial structure, right, you learn to be a man from your father, you learn to be a woman from your mother, right? It's
Yeah.
much more. I've noticed there's a little bit of copy paste that ends up happening from one generation to the next.
Yeah. That's
And then, but having this, I know there wasn't a direct copy paste. There was the opinions of what masculinity and what a man meant, what it meant to be a man from the opinion of the opposite sex. But there was nothing for me to necessarily, or for any of us to necessarily, there wasn't an easy mantle to just grow into. So I know the advantage of that though was we were able to take on attributes or find qualities of the people that were around us, things
yeah.
that we liked.
Yeah. Well, and let's tackle it head on then right now, because the way that you just framed that, I think Joseph really struck a chord with me as well, is that, and Joshua, when you're saying about masculine and feminine energy, and Joseph, you just framed it pretty directly about, hearing from your mom about what it means to be a man. What are some of the lessons you remember either hearing from your mom or others, and how did that resonate with messages you're getting from the world? And again, I sort of throw that out for any of you to kickstart us.
Might be a can of worms there, Cindy.
Yeah. Yes. I'll have to pay for counseling if this causes all kinds of. Anybody brave enough to tackle that?
I don't want to bogart the conversation. Someone
I
else
mean, I can go, but I'm still kind of formulating my thoughts because
Okay.
Well,
can-
I'll say something short then.
Sure.
yeah, you go, you
I'll
go.
say something short then. Yeah, I know this might not go over well with some of your viewers, but in general, I don't think there's a lot of appreciation for masculinity
Mhm.
in today's. When you're talking about what we're being told from society, not a lot of it's positive. So I know having my mother who did have a positive outlook on what it meant to be a man, even
Yeah.
though she had not necessarily the best luck with, I don't know, for example, I know my father, but even then, again, I know those other male figures in her life, I know her father, her brothers, I know other men in her life that supported her, right? There were reasons to appreciate that you were a man.
Yeah.
And that was very useful in I think today's time.
Yeah. Yeah. And just let me say, I know I'm glad you spoke to the elephant in the room. I don't want any of you worried about what you think, my viewers. I want this to be an authentic, organic, very real conversation about the issue, because I think that is the problem. We've got these labels about what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman, what it means to be masculine or what it means to be feminine. And there's no right answer, right? There's no wrong answer. And I think the more we start talking about this, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the more likely everyone is going to be benefit from that, to be able to make choices about who they want to be that are not necessarily even tied to gender. Just how can I be the best version of me, right? Including all of my masculine and all of my feminine, because we all have both, let's face it, right? And all the spaces in between. So I don't want any of you feeling in any way inhibited by, if you think I'm looking for a particular spin. I'm truly not. That's what really intrigued me about having this conversation. So be as brutally blunt as you want, regardless of whatever you think the reception's going to be. So just absolutely
Well,
go for it.
since you said that, actually, I think that was, I know, to tag back to the parenting styles, that was also something that I thought was, regardless of masculine or feminine, regardless of male or woman, I know it was more about the character. I
Yeah.
know being able to look yourself in the mirror was more important than what was between your legs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I'd like to
Second.
piggyback on
Yeah.
that. Or you go
Okay.
ahead, Thomas. You go ahead, Thomas.
Well, I haven't answered the last like 4 questions, so but kind of tying all of those in together, we're talking about masculine, feminine energy, and then the parenting style. I guess the short, sweet answer I would say is growing up with my mom. I would say our mom is a very feminine person. She's got a lot of balls, but she's very feminine. And I feel like with her as role model gave me space, or gave me the ability to be masculine, if that made sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how I would phrase
A
that.
good way of saying it, Thomas.
Yeah. That's lovely. And let me just ask, and I know Joshua, you wanted to jump in on that as well, but what do you see as like when you talk about I see this as masculine or this is feminine, what does that mean to each of you?
Well, I think we've had this conversation before because it's kind of hard to attribute certain things to one masculine or feminine, like we were talking about, where it's more like character.
Yeah.
It's when someone has a strong masculine or feminine energy, they kind of take on the same traits, I would say. You know, you can see strength in both. You can see a lot of compassion in both.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of protecting, a lot of providing when someone's very masculine or very feminine. They're just in different ways.
Yeah.
Well put.
Yeah. Beautiful. And Joshua, I know you'd wanted to jump in earlier and you said you wanted to piggyback, I think, on something Joseph was saying.
Yeah. I guess going back really quickly to one of the other questions about like the parenting styles as far as like what idea I got of what it meant to be a man from my mom. I never really got that focus, I would say, from her. It was mainly more about always building the human.
Yeah.
And a good one. Like what does it take to build an actual good human? Like I remember a lot of the times it was instilling like just discipline practices around like why it's good to be able to keep discipline with certain practices, like with things that are typically not masculine gender roles or whatever like that, like cooking and cleaning, as far as like why you do it. And mainly it's about the integrity as far as why you do the things the way that you do them. And like those were usually, in my experience, always the focus of the upbringing, because at the end of the day, that's applicable to anybody. It doesn't matter who they are. It's just like at the end of the day, are you someone who has that integrity with the way that they act and the way that you conduct themselves? Like if you say you're going to do something, do you actually follow through? Things like that. And so again, like whether that was the job of a mother or a father, I don't know. But like the experience I got was from my mom. And so with that, I guess going back into the masculine, feminine energy and stuff like that, it's just, and Thomas kind of pretty much already said it pretty well, but it's like, it's really hard because I mean, we've had these conversations, not just between like me and my mom, but like I've talked to all my brothers about this too, but like masculine and feminine energies are really, I would say, like quantify it as a, masculine energy does this, or someone who is being masculine does this, feminine energy does this, or a feminine person does this. It's more of like it's just the way that it's done. It's kind of indescribable, which is what makes it hard, because like there's so many instances where it's just like, well, like, well, women are more nurturing and more caring. I was just kind of like, well, I mean, there's been so many times when like, I've been staying with my brother Joseph, and he's been one of the most nurturing, caring people ever, but he just does it in his way.
Yeah.
And like when you receive it, when you're on the receiving end of that, it feels different than if like someone like my mom or someone who's coming more with like a feminine energy would do it. But it's just like, how do you really put into words the difference in the way that a similar action makes you feel? It's kind of really subjective at that point. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong as far as maybe there is some more clear-cut definitions, but in my experience, it's kind of like this just moving thing it's really hard to pin down. But I mean, the one thing I will say though is that for all these definitions that we have, I think a lot of times people know it when they see it.
Yeah.
It's really hard to like define it with words, but as soon as you see it, you're like, that one, or right there,
Yeah.
or that was, that was that, or that was whatever, and so I don't know, that's the best way I have to describe it at this
And
point.
just so you know, I'm loving these answers. If you wonder why I'm smiling like an idiot here, is because like for me, what you're talking about was for me the driving force to starting this. I call it the art of feminine negotiation, but I really struggled myself about even using the word feminine. And the only reason I chose it is because I think for so long, both men and women have been conditioned to see so-called feminine traits as a liability, right, in business, because we've been taught that success is all about exerting power over. And, when we think about who are the best negotiators, we immediately think it's the person who's talking the loudest and the longest. And, after a long, many, many years practicing as a lawyer, I just saw, and we talked about this just briefly before we came on together. It's like we got this idea about masculine and feminine energy all mixed up, where we're pigeonholing things. I don't think there is any one definition of what it means to be feminine or what it means to be masculine. And ultimately, my mission, at least, was to have people start rethinking how we look at this for exactly the reason you just said. How do we show up as being the best possible person, feeling empathy and being able to truly bring empathy to our, trusting our intuition, being more flexible, right? Not assuming that there's only one correct way, showing up with creativity and curiosity. And interestingly, these are things that are typically considered feminine. And we all have the ability to have those traits. So I'm loving your answers on this. And since we're talking about that masculine and feminine energy, Lydia, sort of back to you for a second. Like, were you intentional, if you will, about introducing what people consider to be so-called feminine energy into your parenting? Like, what, if anything, was your hope for your boys around that sort of split?
No, there was no pre-thought about what was feminine. I just was me. And I honestly, that when I said about being honest, it was the only way I really knew how to be.
Yeah.
Because we had gone through so much stuff that the easiest way to do it was to be honest and to be me as much as possible. Because and I really do love masculine energy. I think it's so beautiful. And the same way I love feminine energy.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful, and it works really well together,
Yeah.
if we allow it. So, I mean, you never know why I had 4 boys. Like, well, why? I don't know, but it was a great gift to me. So,
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked a fair bit about it, but for each of you, for the boys, how do you feel about the extent to which sort of feminine energy shows up, or what people perceive to be so-called feminine energy, let's put it that way, shows up in how you approach your life, or masculine energy, both? Like, what do you see as the different or the interplay between them, I guess, is a better question.
Sure. So so you said something kind of at the very beginning when you're talking about at the very beginning where you said traditionally accepted masculine roles, right?
Mhm.
And I know the person who's talking the loudest or the longest.
Yeah.
And I would, going off kind of what Joshua said, I think there's a lot of misinterpretation or even perversion about what it means to be masculine and what it means to be feminine, right? What are those traits? I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm sure biology has some sort of effect on that, but there's also a lot of social forces, right?
Hmm.
So it's hard to distill what exactly it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, and what exactly those traits are.
Yeah.
I mean, the sort of leader that you're describing who's talking the loudest and the longest is oftentimes not the one that's actually the one being listened to,
Yeah.
The more you say, the more you say, the less people listen.
That's true.
So regardless, that's usually, I think, something that I've oftentimes found, for example, in that role, for the most part, men have usually been leaders, right? And based on just the structure of our society, that
Yeah.
past few hundred years or thousands, longer, right?
Yeah.
But most people are pretty shit leaders in the beginning,
Yeah.
right? And so what people oftentimes assume as, oh, well, he's in charge, therefore those qualities must be what made him be in charge. I don't necessarily think that is a correct that's a correct logic.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's he's in charge, he still sucks,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, he's in charge. The people that really listen to masculine or feminine are the ones that are more for collaboration, less for competition, right?
Yeah.
And if you're really going to be a man, if you're really going to, or a woman, if you're going to be a matriarch or a patriarch, if that makes sense. If
Yep.
you're going to be this sorts of figures, and you need to have people listen to you and follow you and believe in you.
Yeah. Well, and let's dig into that. I think you've hit right at the heart of it in some way. So, and again, I'd love to hear from each of you on this. What do you see as the traits that make the most effective leaders, or most effective negotiators? And by that I mean negotiating life, like navigating relationships, both personally and professionally. What do each of you see as the most effective traits, and what you aspire to?
One of the main ones I think has to be competence.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to follow an incompetent leader, man or woman.
Yeah.
Touching on what Joseph said, like collaborative nature about the way that you go about things. Like it's nice to have a leader, especially like in really dire or just dangerous times, to be like, okay, we're doing this, no ifs, ands, or buts, just shut up and follow me kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But those situations, I mean, typically those situations, again, are usually have like some type of background. That leader usually has a background or a history in competence, in respect, in collaboration with the people that they're leading, so
They've
that
earned the
when
trust. They've earned the trust. So
they exactly, yeah, they've earned the trust, so that way when something like that does come about, you don't have to think about it and you just trust, and it's fine. It's good. But I mean, those are the first ones off the top of my head. If anybody else wants to go.
Tomas?
I would say also something kind of going off of the competence of being a leader is reflecting on other people's competence, especially in certain situations, of knowing who's more fit to lead in a certain given situation.
Yeah.
To be able to be a leader and give your leadership to someone else when certain occasion arises is like top form of leadership, being able to pass that torch in the moments where that is needed. And then,
Knowing when to lead and when to follow.
yeah, knowing when to lead and when to follow. I feel
Yeah.
like that's an underrated, if not under talked about part about being a leader, is it's not always do what I say, do what I do. I'm always in charge. I always know everything. Kind of going back to the first question about honesty, about not knowing what it is. It's like, I don't know. You
Yeah.
lead, or this person knows better.
Yeah. That's beautiful, Thomas. And you're right. It's not talked about often, if at all. I'm trying to think any of the training I had through all of my education as well. And we don't frame leadership that way. That one of the key parts of leadership is knowing when to delegate that leadership, share that leadership, right? That consensus leadership. And I take it you're a big on a consensus guy, because if I'm not mistaken, Tomas, your earlier answer as well was about coming to a consensus together through sharing information in that earlier. I think that's a beautiful approach to leadership. So lovely, lovely. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Joseph. I
Oh,
don't
no,
think
it's fine. I was just going to add maybe, I guess in my experience, one of the things that I found is you don't necessarily have to be in charge in order to lead. And
Yes.
then if you are in charge, it's a lot more than just telling people what to do.
Yeah.
There's a philosopher, I think Zeno has a phrase, you have two ears but only one mouth. Listen twice as much as you speak. And I found that personally that's a very good. It's hard, but to be able to catch yourself in that.
Yeah. And we're not great at that in North America in particular. I think we are not great listeners. It's almost embarrassing. We love to hear ourselves talk, and we don't listen effectively, or even when we think we are, we're actually just waiting for our turn to speak half the time and
Correct.
not truly taking in it. How about you, Lydia? Any thoughts on leadership and what that means, effective leadership?
Well, I think leadership, bottom line, is example, you
Yeah.
know, and it you comes from who you are within, because that will shows in every area of your life and how you do things.
Yeah.
So to know thyself is to be a better leader as well.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Beautiful.
yeah.
I love that. I love
I
that.
did want to add something
Yeah.
going off of Thomas's thing with like if somebody is more competent in an area when there's a different area, a different subject arises. I think speaking, I guess, about what you were talking about before, Cindy, as far as like how I guess maybe the previous paradigms are with
Yeah.
power and negotiation and stuff like that. I think the reason why the collaboration aspect or like giving up the wheel to somebody who knows better in a certain situation to lead isn't really like the reason why that's not done as much is because previously in the past there's been a lot of like a fear of a loss of respect if you do willingly give up over the helm to somebody else because they're like, oh, now this person's incompetent now, maybe we shouldn't follow them anymore. But I mean, I think that there's a nuance there because there's a way that you can handle yourself in a situation where you don't know what's best, where you can respectfully or just kind of, I guess, tastefully give up the wheel. So that way there is no loss of respect on your hands. And if there is a loss of respect, it's really from people that were kind of waiting for your downfall anyways, is what I've come to see, I guess, in life and in people. So it's kind of a good way while you're maintaining your own integrity and while trying to be the best leader that you can be, also kind of it's a good way to kind of sniff out the assholes and the
Yeah.
people that were already kind of being snakes to begin with. But in that way, you kind of get to mow the grass and see the snakes for who they are, kind of a thing.
Nice.
So,
That's a
anyways,
great analogy. I love that. Do you write? I'm gonna have to note that for my next book. Put that in. I love that. Mow the grass to see the snakes. And at its core, it sort of comes down to that competitive spirit. For really, that philosophy. Do you come from a competitive philosophy or a collaborative philosophy? Right. The competitive one is not going to want to yield power for all the reasons you were just saying. And I just wanted to circle back, Joseph. You said something that really struck me. I want to put a pin for our listeners as well. That sometimes we don't ostensibly the person who is appearing to be the leader or assuming that role visibly isn't where the real power lies, isn't where the leadership I've learned that lesson the hard way and quickly, in my career when, at the formal negotiation table, the person who's the key speaker is not always, and sometimes often not necessarily the person that actually is the leader, the person who people are going to fall behind. And so I learned very quickly not just to focus on the person who was speaking, but to watch where everybody else on the other side of the table was looking. Because invariably, without even realizing they're doing it, they'll look to the person who actually holds their respect and trust, I think is the word that's come up a few times here. So I love that. And what role do you guys think that emotion plays in both negotiations and, in the broader sense and leadership?
Emotions?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're so taught that emotion has no place in our, in leadership or whatever. And, personally, I'll tip my hand here. We're humans. We are emotional creatures. I think to ignore it, we do so at our peril, personally. But I'd love your thoughts on the role of emotion in leadership and negotiation.
Are you separating emotion and intuition, or is
Hmm.
there overlap there?
Well, I'm a big
How are you defining that?
I think like when we think typically of emotion, it's like, and women are often criticized for, oh, you're too emotional. That's why women can't be great negotiators, right? They bring their emotions to the table. So I'm thinking of like anger or hurt or resentment, intuition. And actually we can go there next because I'd love your thoughts on intuition. I'm a big believer and I think it's underutilized these days. We've sort of lost the skill, but I'm talking just sort of pure emotion, what role that plays, how that plays out in being an effective leader or negotiator.
Well, again,
Uh,
really quick, pure emotion, what do you mean? How, just to put an example on it, like how well does screaming at people make you a good leader? Like, what do you mean by pure emotion?
Yeah, well, both recognizing emotion in others, recognizing emotion in yourself. Should we
Ah,
stifle
okay.
it? Should we draw on it? Should we ignore it when we see it in somebody else? Or should we, get curious and ask questions to call it out? Where do you think? Go ahead, Lydia. I see you're raising your hand. Just jump in there.
Well, I'm going to say this, and I think maybe people might get mad or whatever. But, people say, you show emotion, you're not a good leader, and people shut off the minute you show emotion, especially at a formal negotiating table.
Yeah.
But I think here's the thing. If there is true emotion, like you feel a sadness or a certain betrayal or a certain insecurity, if you voice that in an intelligent way in negotiation, then it goes farther because
Yeah.
comes from a real state that is being felt.
Yeah.
Now, if you go overboard and speak in that over
Yeah.
emotional state, then that's where you start losing people. But I think you really grab people when you actually admit and say it and show that emotion comes through your word.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fine line, but not really. It's again going back to being honest.
I
Like I
absolutely.
feel betrayed here, and this is why.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling these things because of this, that, and the other thing. But I think we can get beyond this, and maybe we could do it this way and that way the other way. You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I
really
agree. I mean, I think it builds trust, right? It builds authenticity and it builds relationship. And ultimately, leadership is about building relationships. So I couldn't agree with you more, Lydia. What about you guys?
I mean, at the end of the day, people are following people, right? And emotion, we are emotional creatures. I will say, when it comes to a lot of what we would call negative emotions, those, I don't know, I don't mean trigger in the way that it's usually
Yeah.
said in today's day, but let's say you get angry at something, that sort of trigger can then be used as a teacher, right? Okay, why am
Yeah.
I feeling this? I
Yeah.
know, and there's usually something that probably we're going to talk about when we talk about intuition. There's a reason why we're angry about something. There's a reason why we're emotional about something, and that can be used as probes and feelers in conversations, negotiations, relationships. But
Yeah.
then on the other side too, right? What is it? The logos, ethos, and pathos, right?
Yeah.
One of the techniques in connecting with people and convincing people is one of the main three is going off of emotions.
Yeah.
I mean, we see this happen oftentimes for negative, oftentimes to control people, right? If you can get people to feel a certain way, if you can instill certain emotions, that
Yeah.
can be used to control people.
Absolutely.
But it can also be a good thing too, right? I work in the sciences, right? And if you have someone who's very passionate about a project, it's a lot easier for you to buy into that, right? You
Yeah.
want to follow people who are excited about what they're doing, regardless of the field or the situation.
Yeah.
So those sorts of conveying those sorts of emotions is a form of communication.
Yeah. Oh, this is such a great conversation. I love it. And you guys are not afraid to go deep. This is so refreshing. This is great. And just
Well,
before,
you've met our mom, right?
yeah, you had the best role model, I must say. So before we jump to intuition, and I also want to touch on vulnerability. So Joshua, Tomas, anything you wanted to add to that about the emotion piece?
Yeah, I got something, but Thomas, you go ahead if you want first.
I'm still formulating my answer, so I'll wait
Okay.
till
All good.
All
I've
right.
got some more context.
I would say that for me personally, emotion plays a role, let's say, in the art of persuasion and whatnot. But I think the line is, and again, because we are, oh, I wouldn't say that we're emotional beings. I would say that emotions is one facet of our being, just like our intellect, just like our hearts. I mean, maybe heart and emotions is the same, but I don't know. I like to make the differentiation of more than that as far as different aspects of our being. But I think the line, I guess, with the emotion when it comes to persuasion is, again, because we are feeling beings, let's say, people can sense whether or not the emotion has overtaken you as a person who is a leader. So like that's the line. Like if the emotion is used in conjunction with your message, then by all means use it because emotion is one of the most powerful persuaders when it comes to the art of persuasion. But if people can sense that you are no longer you and instead you are rage, you are sadness, you are contempt, you are whatever like that, then that's the only message that they're going to hear. And then I think that's why people say it just as a blanket, stupid generalization statement that oh, emotion has no point or in persuasion. It's like, well, that's not true because emotion and persuasion go hand in hand for sure.
Yeah.
But it's, I think that's the line is like when people can tell that you have succumbed to the emotion where versus you actually like using that emotion. Because like usually a sign of a good leader, I would say, is somebody who's using that emotion to understand both themselves and the people around them and the situation. But that's just the sign of a not good leader when they've become overrun by the emotion of the situation because then they've essentially lost themselves and they're flying blind essentially, and then that's why I think people don't want to follow somebody like that because they just go, well, you can't see 2 feet in front of your own ass, so why would I follow you now? Like you need to get out of this state you're in and become a little bit more clear-headed. But once you get to that stage where you're able to balance and kind of marry both the intellect, the mind, and the heart in such a way where both of them have are giving you feedback, are giving you information so that way you can use both of them at your disposal. I think that's where the sweet spot lies. And
Yeah.
I think that's where in the past people have said that emotion has, is stupid or don't get too overly emotional. It's just like, well, are you speaking or is the emotion speaking? And obviously I am human. I have definitely learned that the hard way. Like I have very oftentimes, and Joseph can corroborate this one, but like where I just lose myself, like with an argument
We
with
all
family, they're just like, I know we all have, but I have a tendency to make an ass of myself when it comes to that. But like that's been my own experience. Is like that's the line, and I usually whenever I feel myself getting, let's say, infatuated with an emotion in that way, that's when I know, ooh, I've crossed the line. Like I am no longer me. I am the emotion. I need to kind of get my bearings again. And it's kind of like I don't know if you've ever been like snowboarding or skiing, and you're
Yeah.
in Canada, so I'm sure you have. But if you're snowboarding or skiing, like you get that feeling where like you're just like the skis or the snowboard is just a little bit too
Yeah.
far out in front of you, and like you're
Yeah.
literally about like a 2 seconds away from going or
Yeah.
face planting. And again, usually it's the same situation in like an overly emotional circumstance where we usually have the tendency to try to overcorrect. Same thing on the mountain where you're like, oh crap, if you're not well versed in that, arena, then you would have the tendency to overcorrect and then smacked right on your face. And it's trying to find that line where you know that you can still keep your feet underneath you, I think is
Yeah.
just the goods.
Yeah. Well, Lydia, you've obviously done a great job on the honesty piece as well, because Joshua, that was a beautiful answer and a vulnerable answer, right? Like I love to, and immediately, and I'm sure our listeners would agree, did you feel that connection you felt immediately as soon as Joshua started saying, hey, I've been totally guilty of this and made an ass of myself? It immediately creates that human connection. And it works the other way as well. And I think you guys have all been saying this, that to be able to tap into what the other party is feeling as well. Like I think often when we're seeing high emotion on the other side of a table, a bargaining table, we tend to want to not deal with it and push it away or tamper it down. And to me, it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to say, okay, I seem to have really hit a chord there. Let's talk about that. What's happening right now, right? What are you feeling about it? And that's almost always the breakthrough to get to that next level. So Thomas, I want to make sure we don't forget you. I know you'd said you were formulating some thoughts on the emotion piece. Did you want to jump in on that or?
Yeah, I got a little bit to say. I think the way Josh said it was really, really good, and I really liked it. I would just say it's not something to run away from.
Yeah.
Forms, I feel like that is typically what is looked upon
Yeah.
in when it comes to emotions, in whatever sense, you know, and everyone is taught their own different way, but I feel like everyone is taught that there's some kinds of emotions that you run away from or that you stuff down, that you hide. No matter who you are, it's
Yeah.
different, but everyone has that.
Yes.
And that's not something to be putting on the back burner or
Yeah.
to be avoiding,
Yeah.
because the more you avoid it, the more it becomes some subconscious and the more it controls you.
Absolutely. Isn't that the
And
truth? We've all seen that.
not to be run from, but to be understood.
Yeah.
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 It kind of goes back to what you were saying before, Cindy, with like when you're encountering a influx of emotion from other people, like if you yourself don't run away from that emotion within yourself, you're much more likely to be able to, when you have already being hit with that, emotion from other people, you are much more likely to engage and be like, okay, I know what this is, or at least I know how I've experienced this. So there's at least a beginning of a connection there. And
Yeah.
just with you yourself, I think it starts there with not running away from it yourself. So that way you are able to create more of a base of empathy that you're able to connect more with people. So you can weather your not just your emotions, but other people's as well. And then with persuasion, that just gets you a wider base of connection and understanding with other people that I think helps with being a better leader and everything like that. So
Yeah. These are, oh my gosh, you guys, your answers, you're blowing me away here. I gotta say, I'm gonna have to send you all the transcript from this as well. And you guys should be putting a book out there, Samaniego boys' thoughts on on how to be a better man or whatever, or just a better human, frankly. It's just some beautiful answers. And I know you had raised, I think Joseph, it was you who'd said about intuition, and I'm a big believer that that is super important. And I think historically, if you look at our indigenous people, it was something that we really tapped into, and somewhere along the way, we stopped trusting it. So I'd love each of your thoughts on intuition, what it is, why does it matter?
Okay, yeah. So talked about, at least in a more modern sense, there's a book, I think Malcolm Gladwell, a book called Blink, and he talks about it in a much more analytic way, describing what intuition is. It's kind of like a subconscious computer, right? That's able to pick up on all the little things that consciously you don't pick up on.
Yeah,
And that's why we get those feelings in our guts, because there is information, there is logic that's going on, but it's maybe not necessarily something that we as a society are taught to listen to.
yeah,
And I think that I think there's a subtlety there. I remember my mom saying a lot of times, she would talk about the heart versus the mind.
yeah.
And she would say something along the lines of the heart never screams, it only ever whispers. And I feel like that's very
Hmm.
true.
Oh, I love that.
You got a lot of the things that are screaming at you, from upbringing, from society, from the media, from, the other person that you're having a conversation with, right? And then all that stuff creates a lot of turmoil in your own head. But to
Yeah,
be able to go beyond that, to feel, or be able to quiet that and
yeah,
listen to what your gut is really saying,
yeah,
there's usually wisdom there, and there's usually a logic there, but it's kind of hard to make, especially if in your context, a business decision,
yeah,
because people are going to want to hear logical answers, right?
yeah,
Even though it's a hard thing to justify to other people, even though you may be right.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And that was beautiful about the heart scream, the whisper, the heart whispering. And we're in a loud
100%.
world, right? We become a very extrovert driven society where there's so much noise. Sometimes being able to just quiet the mind, quiet ourselves and tap into that, gut intuition, whatever we call it. I believe there's generational wisdom there if we allow ourselves to listen to it. What about the rest of you? Any thoughts on intuition? I think Joseph did a beautiful job there.
go ahead, Thomas.
I don't have it's quite as a formed thought as that, but I do agree with what he said about intuition is like the pieces that your conscious mind doesn't pick up on.
Yeah,
I I agree with that. That a lot of times you know things before you know things,
yeah,
and I can't explain how or why,
yeah,
and at least yet.
yeah,
And that is always something to be listened to. Like Joseph said, our mom has always said that about the mind talks loudly and your heart talks very quietly. So it's very hard to hear. So I think that becoming more in touch with that aspect and being able to hear both of them at the same time is really makes a huge difference.
Beautiful. And I mean, we all have examples. We all have countless examples where we didn't pay attention to that little niggling voice and it goes sideways. And we knew, right? I mean, at some level we knew it and we didn't trust it enough. And Thomas, if I could just point out, you're so understated. You're like, oh, well, I haven't really put my thoughts together on this. And then you deliver some beautiful, powerful insight. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Toot your own horn because you've definitely had some fabulous insights here. So, Joshua, anything you wanted to add on the intuition piece?
Yeah, for me, intuition is it's another form of vision, but it's not as simple as just opening up your eyes. It's for me, at least personally, the way that I connect with it, and I've been horrible with this, especially lately. And this kind of actually talks about before with what Thomas was mentioning about the emotions and not running away from them. I have been doing a fantabulous job at running away from certain emotions lately because I'm just like, nope, not ready for that. I got bills and I got other shit I gotta worry about for right now. So we're just gonna put that on the back burner. But speaking to that, the funny thing is about the intuition is like I've noticed that whenever I go like internally and meditate, it's just for me, I started with like a basic Vipassana style meditation where you just focus on bodies and bodily sensations and kind of like a body scanning type of thing essentially because like you're never really going to shut up your mind. You just give your mind a job to do, a job where you are like telling it what to do instead of it telling you what to do and you're just kind of at mercy at it. But I've noticed that whenever I am doing those practices where I'm going internally and kind of just seeing how my body feels, the inside of my body, scanning all throughout, one, most of the shit that I haven't been looking at starts to go away and starts to get cleared. But once that gets cleared, that's that form of vision, that form of intuition starts to just again whisper and just go and stuff. So it's like for me, it's almost like intuition is it needs to be practiced almost like how you go to the gym and lift weights kind of a thing. Like, and there are ways that you can do that and cultivate it. You just have to, as Thomas so lovely said before, don't run away from your own bullshit. So because that clogs up the channel real quick, real fast, and so yeah, don't do that. Don't do what I'm doing right now.
Well, and I'm glad you said about practicing it because I think most people think, oh, you've got it or you don't. Either you tap into it or you don't. But it is something we can hone and
And
practice.
I think it's something that everybody has too. It's just, again, it's a muscle you have to know how to. I mean, it helps having like a little bit of a starter as far as like where to go, how to listen to it. But again, this is just how I do it. Like also too, like you can, in my experience, you supplement it with other things. Like a lot of times I find a lot of solace or those moments of intuition when I go out in nature and get away from my regular day-to-day life or just whatever, get out of the city, get out of whatever, and just be like more some of my favorite places on earth are just places where like the silence is so loud that it's almost deafening how silent it is, and you just can't help but hear your intuition in moments like that. And it's moments like that that I've had in my life that it kind of led me to the realization like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that's where your intuition lies. It lies when you are the most silent, when you are the most ready to listen. And there are things that you can do even when you are having to pay bills in the city, blah, 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 blah. There are practices that you can do and keep up, kind of like how you go to the gym, that you can keep cultivating it and make sure it's a well-oiled machine, essentially. Or I don't like calling it a machine because like the intuition is not a machine. It's much more, we're going to go back to masculine and feminine. In my opinion, it's much more feminine. Like the way that it, at least to me, maybe it's because my mom is a big part of my upbringing in life, but I think that my intuition is more feminine.
Nice. Anyway, well, and you're not alone. They did a big study. I think they called it the Athena Doctrine or the Athena Study. And, they canvassed 60,000 people across 60 different countries. And it was amazing, right or wrong, how we're conditioned to see certain traits, overwhelming numbers that people would see this trait as feminine, this trait as masculine. And it's not that we don't both have all of them, right? But there was this interesting, pretty consistent division on that. I can't believe we should have booked like a double session for this, or we'll have to have you. You're going to be the family that keeps on coming back because it's just such great perspectives. But quickly, if we could tap in, I'd love each of your thoughts on how you define success. What does that mean for you?
I can go.
Okay,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Mama. You go ahead, Mama.
Ladies first.
I would say success is you being at peace.
Mm, nice. So simple, and yet we don't do it very often, do we, Lydia? Right? As a society, we don't embrace that as a goal. I love that. It's beautiful.
Well, because if you're at peace, that means that you are good with every area of
Yeah.
your life, you know.
Yeah.
And even though you're not maybe there in one area, you know, you have the wisdom to understand that you will get there, and the trust.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
with that, you have that inner peace.
That's
And
beautiful.
many of us, you cannot enjoy anything if you do not have that inner peace.
Yeah. And the opposite is also true. When you do have peace, the other stuff just comes more naturally without a fight. It comes organically. That's beautiful. Okay. Joshua, you'd want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it was Paulo Coelho who said this, but it's kind of stuck with me ever since I read it. But to me, this whole definition of success is just with whatever you're trying, with whatever you're endeavoring. The key to it is just falling down 7 times and getting up 8, as in just
Yep.
trying one more time and keep going with whatever you're trying to do. Like, so long as you just kept persevering, then that's a success in my book. But also too, with what my mom just said, it's kind of a fruitless goal if you don't have that piece. So
Yeah.
that might be a nice little caveat to add as well. But I don't know, the Paulo Coelho thing's always
Yeah.
stuck with me. So that's
Yeah.
usually my definition.
He's brilliant. I love his stuff. My gosh, you just every page has you just thinking more deeply and more deeply. And I just want to point out and put a pin for our listeners as well. The way that Joshua just framed that when we talked about success, really it was taking failure and embracing failure. And we are so conditioned to resist against failure. And I love the fact, Joshua, that you're saying you see failure as the path to success, right? I mean, that is success at its essence is try again, dust yourself off, learn what you can, hold it up and explore it and carry on. I think that's a really nice reframe on failure to turn it into success. It's beautiful. Thomas, how about you?
I'm not sure who said it, if it was the person who wrote Think and Grow Rich, or I heard it from Bob Proctor, but I liked the way that he defined success of being it's knowing where you are, knowing where you want to go, and actively working towards that. Not that you're there,
Yeah.
because where you want to go is forever changing.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same this second as it is the next second. So technically, you're never reaching what you want. You're always, but as long as you're always listening to that intuition, I guess, and
Yeah.
listening to the voice, the emotions that you're not, that you should be, and following that, following yourself, that is in itself success.
Yeah.
Because it's more about the tools you build and the peace that you get along the way. Because even if you get millions of dollars, it's about acquiring the tools that you built on the inside and the peace that you get, that if you get $100 million over 10 years of work and then tomorrow it's all gone, you're still the same because you know you can get it again because you know who you have become.
Yeah. And you know what I love about that answer, Thomas, is inherent in your answer is this idea that it's, you know where you are, you know where you want to be, but it's enjoying the journey, which we often don't do enough, right? That it's that middle piece to focus on. And also, I think an inherent in your answer is the constant growth, because where you think you want to go may keep changing. And if we focus on this piece of it, we're always growing and we're always present in the journey. I think that's a beautiful definition of success. And Joseph, I think we missed you on that one. So how about you?
That's all right. Yeah, I would probably summarize kind of what all of us were saying then. I mean, success, usually people talk about that as an end goal, as a state of being. If I become rich, I am successful. I know if I get the job that I want, I'm successful. If I have the house that I want, I'm successful. We usually attribute it to relatively shallow
Yeah.
goals. And then building off what you and Thomas were then saying about the journey, you hear it a lot. It's not the destination, but it's the journey. And I would actually kind of disagree with both of those goals. I mean, in my experience, those that only focus on the journey oftentimes are more reckless than they are free. And
Interesting.
then those that only focus on their destination find that their reward is oftentimes hollow.
Yeah.
And so I would say that it's who you become on the journey that determines the destination.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, being able to look yourself in the mirror, and again, it is a constant pursuit. It is not a moment in time that you can define as this success.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
pursuit.
beautiful. And again, I mean, you guys are, and I can't thank you enough. You're not giving superficial answers to any of this. I mean, your answers have been so thoughtful and profound. I really appreciate that. And just Rob, I'd love, because we talked about this sort of masculine, feminine earlier. And for the boys, if each of you can just sort of quickly summarize for you, what does it mean to be the best man that you can be?
Really saved the heavy hitters for last, huh?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to, in a couple seconds, I don't know if I'd be able to, give an answer that I would be happy with. But I would say something along the lines of making to be taking care of other people, focusing externally as opposed to internally. I
Nice.
feel a lot of people, especially in today's day and age, are very focused on what they perceive as their own happiness, but really is not really. And then they're always, because that's their focus, they keep on wondering why they're never happy,
Yeah.
And I feel like to be a man or a woman, really, again, going off what
Yep.
Joshua says, I know when you see it, you see it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, when you distill those attributes of being and maybe call it a true adult,
Yeah. Nice.
you begin to have when you distill the attributes of a true adult, you kind of get the same things, and how it manifests might come due to psychology, biology, society. I don't know. I'm not going to go there, but yeah, I would say taking care of the people that are around you.
Yeah, caring, compassion, and being of service, which is something that we don't often pay enough attention to, or aren't.
True leaders serve those that are
Yes,
around them.
absolutely. That's nice. Very nice. All right, Joshua.
Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, and again, there's no magic to the question. I mean, because we sort of started with this idea about, negotiate for your mom, for Lydia, about, sort of negotiating with your sons to raise them to be the best men that they can be. And I just wondered for each of you, what does that look like to you? Like when you think, hey, I want to be the best man I can be, what does that mean for you?
Okay, well, I would say I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I've learned a lot from those mistakes for sure. But I guess put most succinctly, what it means to be the best version of the man that I can be would probably be like not just being aware of, but also, let's say, addressing certain parts of my bullshit and taking care of my bullshit, so that way I don't make my bullshit other people's bullshit. And I think that's a start, at least, but I don't think that truly encompasses all of it. But I think, I mean, speaking honestly and vulnerably, like that's just where I'm at right now. I know that that will change. Like
Yeah.
me personally, like what Joseph said, I'd love to provide and take care of people as well. But
Yeah.
I personally see myself as not necessarily ready for that or really in a position to be able to do that because, like I said, I know that there's a lot of stuff that I have to work on. I have to heal or get better or at, and those are the things that I want to make sure aren't anybody else's problems. And in order to be a good man, I think, and good leader and stuff like that, or just a good human, is to be able to know where your faults lie, be able to work on them, and like know how to keep that stuff to yourself. Not saying that I'm like boxed in or anything like that, but like I said, not projecting all of your crap on other people and then blaming other people for that. You did this to me. It's like, oh no, it's my own stuff. But wow. I just realized I said succinctly, but that was very not succinct.
No,
But
I mean, I
anyways,
got it. Well, actually, it was the first one. I could almost see a T-shirt out of that, right? Like, recognize
yeah,
my
there's a lot of shit
bullshit,
all
deal
over
with
that.
my
Yeah.
bullshit, don't project my bullshit. Thomas,
But yeah, I mean,
oh, go ahead. Sorry, Joshua.
I was just wrapping up. I was just gonna say there's so much more to that, but I think that's a start.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Moms.
like that when you said this is a good start because that's true, right? Know thyself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also agree that I don't know if I can sum that up in this short amount of time, but what we talked about of being able to just look and know and see and be like, oh, yes, that's it. And to know that, well, Joseph has talked a lot about like being able to look at yourself in the mirror is, I would say beyond that is being able to look at yourself and be like, ah, that's it.
Yeah.
And that would be
Yeah. Nice.
what it would be.
Yeah.
if I can
beautiful.
put it in the simplest terms.
Yeah. I can't believe our time is going so quickly. I glanced at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I told you guys we'd only be this long. And we've like gone well beyond that. So thank you for being so gracious with your time here. And I normally like to end by asking the same question. So if you can indulge me for just a moment more, and again, we'll go around in order here. It'll be the easiest. What is one of the greatest mindset shifts you've had in your life? Like, and it doesn't have to be about this issue that we're talking about, nothing about masculine, feminine, just one of those moments that you're like, aha, and you see things differently or show up differently. So, Lydia, I don't know, I'm just looking at where I could see on the video here. Are you comfortable starting? And then we'll just go across the screen.
For me, one is changing failure into information.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
That was key.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't heard it framed quite that way. I love that actually. Failure into information, right? Something usable. Nice.
Which
Nice.
leads to freedom. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Joseph, how about you?
I would say something along the lines of taking absolute responsibility.
Mm. Yeah.
So it's real easy to constantly blame other people and circumstances for why you're in the place that you are. At the beginning of our life, we're all dealt with cards, right?
Yeah.
And we can bitch about how the shittiness of the cards that we're dealt, or we can do something about those, and we can play with the cards that we're dealt.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about trauma in this day and age. At the end of the day, people don't really respect trauma. People may empathize, people may sympathize, people may pity, people may do a lot of words, but they won't respect trauma. They only respect what you do in spite of that,
Yeah.
or what you've been able to do because of that. So taking responsibility and ownership of everything in your life,
Yeah.
I think is actually said that some people think, oh, that sounds like a very heavy place to be, but I actually think it's a lot more freeing, because you're not under anybody's thumb at that point.
Yeah.
You're under nobody else's boot when it's all your fault.
I love
So
it.
I think that's been a very productive attitude, and has helped me be able to look myself in the mirror.
Yeah. I think it's a game changer. I remember the moment when it happened for me where and as you say, there's a certain freedom that comes from recognizing I can't control everything that happens in the world or to me, but I can control how I react to it. I can control what I think about it. So therefore, I control my experience of my life. And there's a real freedom in that. I love that. Joshua, how about you?
Well, I had a feeling that because I was going to say the cards thing that Joseph said, but it makes sense because he's the one I learned it from. But that was definitely a game changer for me because, I mean, yeah, you can't choose the cards you're dealt, but you can choose how to play them, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Nice.
That was definitely a game changer. But I guess my second one, I guess, is
Sorry.
nah, damn you, like I said, like I was technically stealing yours anyway, so kind of knew he was gonna say that. But I guess for me, the main thing is, and this also may sound kind of harsh, but it's kind of still along the same vein of like being able to take full responsibility of your life and your circumstances and everything, is that the universe doesn't owe you a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Like there's, in my opinion, and this is just where I'm at, there's really no such thing as I deserve. I know they help with like affirmations and stuff like that, but like I deserve this, that, and the other thing all the live long day. It's mainly more of like, in a certain sense, like, are you worthy of that is really the question, I think. And you become worthy of that through things like taking full responsibility of your situation. And in spite of all the troubles, all the trials,
Yeah.
you overcome. And so that's why, yeah, I guess the whole
Like that.
universe doesn't owe you a goddamn thing.
Yeah. And sort of tied to that, as you were saying it made me think like, not just, what am I, do I deserve that, but how can I create that for myself, right? Is I like
Exactly. It's like it's the idea of like I guess the entitlement, or like
Yeah.
of like just because I'm this or I'm that, I should have this. It's like no, no,
Yeah.
not at all.
Yeah. Nice. Refreshing. Thomas, how about you?
Again, I think it's gonna be just the same thing with a different phrasing, but the kind of whole mindset of it's you versus you, or rather it's everything is in your control.
Yeah.
As opposed to you might not be able to control a hurricane that happens,
Yeah.
but you can, if you're still there, still kicking it, you get to control each moment, each breath that you're taking, you have a decision to make. And I feel like me personally, I've noticed that it's been getting easier and easier not to make decisions in the moment and just being like, oh, this is just life. This is just how it is, and not realizing that every single second that you're breathing alive, you can change that, which is the first step to changing anything.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. And the combination of all of your guys as well. You were just saying about the hurricane, and I was thinking you can choose to wallow in it, or going back to what Joseph said, you can choose to go and be of service to other people who are hurting or whatever, right? So that's beautiful. Well, I cannot thank you guys enough. Truly, I have loved this conversation. It's been just gone off in all kinds of directions. It's beautiful. I could keep talking for another hour here with you guys, but I thank you, each of you, for choosing to be here today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much,
having
Cindy.
us.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Cindy.
For having us.
And for our listeners, we'll make sure to have information in the show notes as well. I mean, had we had time, I mentioned about Lydia's book. We'll put information too for how you can reach out. Lydia does some beautiful work in the world that makes the world a better place. Her book is doing fabulously and with good reason. So we'll make sure to have all the details for that and more in the show notes so you can check it out. And thank you guys for joining us today. I have no doubt that you are glad that you did. There's just so much value from this episode. I'm only half joking about getting the transcripts and sending it back so we could get a book out on this. There's some really beautiful, life-changing gems that have been dropped during this episode. So please give the gift of sharing as well. Make sure you share this episode with other people in your life, because I don't think there's anybody who couldn't benefit from some of the gifts we've been given in this episode from this fabulous family who have shared their philosophies on how to be the best version of yourself, how to negotiate your best possible life. So make sure to subscribe, share this episode. And before we sign off, if you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills so you can negotiate your best life, check out what I've got to offer at theartoffemininenegotiation.com. And make sure to grab a copy of my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you haven't done that already. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve in this beautiful life, from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until the next time, take care.